Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local. So Mike, you're on deck now here, or you're up rather. And, yes.
I use our Fridays to help me learn more. So you guys are going to have to give me a little bit of schooling about Google's Privacy Sandbox on Android. I read this whole announcement, and it was an announcement about a plan to maybe create a plan to have some privacy on Android in the future. I read it and I did not see anything real in it. And so I was just curious. And this opinion of mine was, and this is something Gruber at Daring Fireball said, basically it's a plan to create a plan 2 years from now. So there was that is this just performance theater or is there something real here? Was my first question. I went and looked, and Google has, with the exact title, Privacy Sandbox on Android, has 25,000 articles in search already and 5,000 highly trusted news sources writing about this. So they got great coverage of something that that appears to me to be vaporware. And then, so there's two questions here. One, what was their intent in this? And two, is there more than vaporware here? And three, will Google ever really respect our privacy? And I turn to you guys and your dog to see if there's any answers there.
So it struck me, Mike, as running the exact same playbook that they've run with these, farcical summaries of how well they're combating spam in Google Maps, right? It is, they put out a shiny object that the tech press covers without any critical thought whatsoever, and all of a sudden they're planting the seed in consumers' minds everywhere that Google actually does care about privacy, right? And even if there isn't anything really behind it. So I truly think this is a core corporate PR strategy at the highest levels of Google, that this is how we get our message out, and that there's just not going to be enough critical analysis by any major news outlet. They're going to sort of help spread Google's propaganda without ever really understanding if there's anything behind it. So.
Well, let me say something slightly less cynical. The dog agrees with you, but I'll take a different position, which is the way that I see this. So the coverage was largely about Apple, ironically. Google's going to do this thing that's like what Apple has done, and look at Facebook, which lost $10 billion or said it was going to lose $10 billion as a result, and look at their market cap. So Google is that's sort of how the coverage went. I think that Google has the Privacy Sandbox initiative for the desktop, and that there's some real stuff there. Topics, coming out of their cohort targeting, they've changed to topics, which we talked about previously, which is a version of contextual targeting with a behavioral targeting element to it. I think that's what we're going to see for Android. I think it's going to be largely a mirror of that. So I do think that there is something here, that they're porting over the desktop approach into Android, and they're going to get rid of the Android ID in the same way that Apple has essentially deprecated IDFA. So I think there's some substance here. I think the timing is theater, right? I think they have not implemented anything from what I can tell, and so I think their announcement is really designed to garner the maximum positive PR coverage that they can. Now, which is also playing not just to the public but to the regulators. I think that's a lot of it. Like, hey, we really do care about these consumer privacy issues because they're getting dinged along with Facebook all over the world for violating this or that sort of privacy rule, privacy regulation. So I'm not quite as cynical that it's saying there's nothing at all here, but I do think it's kind of it's a PR move on their part to say 2 years from now we will have some tangible thing to implement.
And then in 2 years, when it's clear that plan is going to be unworkable, they will come up with another plan that will take 2 years to develop and then implement. We've already seen this. We've seen the same story before with the death of the cookie.
Right. Well, I think that reflects the very real problem of what do you do? What do you actually do that's going to try and represent a compromise
And
between
compromising people's privacy is fundamental to a huge amount of Google's revenue in a way that it's just not for Apple. So
right. So that's the interesting thing to me, is comparing the two hypotheticals, Google's hypothetical solution with Apple's solution. So I don't believe that Google can do anything which represents an opt-in. I don't think that they will do anything that is an opt-in. It will be some version of opt-out, which will be confusing, and most consumers won't pay attention because all of those opt-out solutions are too burdensome for the consumer. What makes the Apple solution so effective is that it's so simple and it's an opt-in. Do you want them to track you? No. And Google knows that if they allow an opt-in, that people will say no to that. And as a consequence, we're not going to see an opt-in from Google, which I think renders the privacy side of it probably ineffective. Or largely
the oblique
ineffective.
criticism of Apple in their piece was interesting too, because Apple gave Facebook, all people, a fair bit of time to come up with alternative ad attribution models. And you can see what Facebook did. All they did was complain about it. They didn't come up with an ad. Apple gave them almost 2 years from announcement to actual implementation. So a similar time frame with betas along the way, and Facebook didn't do much of anything about it.
Well, so, they said recently that they're getting better at attribution. I think right. They've cut down on the undercounting of iOS installs or whatever the conversions is. So they're getting somewhat better. I mean, I think this remains, this is sort of the internet's major problem, is how do you respond to the increasing demand for privacy after all the abuses and still give marketers targeting and attribution tools that are not going to be an exploitation of user data or deceptive in some way. I think it's very challenging, and I mean, my personal preference is make everything opt-in. But when you do that, then you get 14% or whatever the number is of people opting in. So any more on that exciting topic?
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.